Hello and welcome to Janome Stitch Club UK. My name is Julia Langley and I'm one of the Janome educators. And every month in this club, what I try to do is take you through a technique or feat or some of the stitches maybe on your machines to help you get a little bit more creative maybe, and maybe use some of the things that you haven't as yet used. So this month I was asked, somebody asked in the comments about the lettering, and we've covered this in a few previous videos but only slightly. So I thought today we'd actually take a little look at this because quite a lot of models of machines do have lettering on them, and it's absolutely fantastic for just adding to your projects. A little wash bag here, so something like this little mini quilt here, I've put lettering on there, as you can see. This is a little swimming bag that I did for my granddaughter, swims like a mermaid. There we go, onto ribbon. Oh, and there is the whole set of these, by the way. These are my reindeer that come out every Christmas. They're looking a bit battered now, but they're all named because you have to name them. So I thought that today what I would do is just go through the basics of how to get your lettering to look really good. So I'm going to show you first off how to actually program the lettering in, and then do a very quick little project that you can maybe have a go at. So let's start having a look at the lettering systems. So on models, a lot of the 7mm models that have alphabets, and the Atelier 5 and 6, and I think the 8200, some of the machines where you have this system here, you actually have numbers where you have to put in the number for each letter and then memory in between. I've covered this in a previous video a little bit, but I thought it was worth going through again. What I find with this is it is a little bit like a code. So what I tend to do is literally write it out like a code. So for example here, Mum made this with a heart. What I've done is I've then gone through my book. Rather than doing it on the machine, I actually go through the book, write down the numbers, and then a dot. So I've got uppercase and lowercase here. I always think it looks nice if you do a mix of the two. The 98 is actually the gap here that is in between. So I know that this is Mum, and then there's the gap, and then made and gap, this, and then there's a heart. So there's another gap, and 93 is that little heart there. Okay, so all I need to do now is go to my machine, and I've got actually doing 23 memory, 57 memory, 49 memory, and that way I don't need to sort of keep looking at the machine and looking at the sheet or the stitch chart on the machine. I just find this much quicker. Also, because to be honest, these are the sort of things that you will use over and over again. So you'll end up with like a little book of certain labels and things that you make out time and time again. So you don't have to go through that process every time. It's a lot speedier to do it this way. So that's the first thing. The other thing is actually laying out your lettering and how to go about it. The number one thing with this is stabilizing your fabric in some way, manner or form. Like with a lot of these decorative stitches, it needs to have something on the back. Okay, if you just go through one layer of fabric, you're not going to get the neatest stitch. When we normally demo on felt just because it's neater. But we've got stabilizer, we've got stitch and tear on the back of that, because we know that it's going to make it much easier to get really neat stitches, and then you can take it away afterwards. So it's always worth prepping your fabric first. I'm very fond of doing it onto ribbon, as I showed you before on this bag, for example. I've actually stitched it out on ribbon and then with fancy stitches, and then I will actually add it to the project. And things like these little sort of made with love labels, things like this, I can make loads of those in advance and have them in a little jar, so I can just have a bit of a session of making labels. So what I wanted to say was all of this, and you see I've got some lines drawn on here. What's really helpful is to give yourself a guide so that you've got something to follow. Myself use something that's going to disappear, like a heat resist pen. I'm using the friction pen because it's black, so I know that's going to really show up on the camera. But chalk or even masking tape, it doesn't really matter. You just want to give yourself a straight line to follow. So once we've got that in place, the other thing, if you're doing more than one line, for example, so like I've done here, I not only drew those straight lines for me to actually sew on, but I would have also drawn a line along here so that I know exactly where to start, so that I can line up this starting here. Okay, if you want to do something a little bit fancier, so say you were doing a poem or something like that, then what I would tend to do is actually write it out, stitch it out on the machine, each line at a time, so that I can then measure and halve it. And instead of having a line there, I would have a line in the center and then measure those amounts. I hope that makes sense. Let me actually kind of show you, because I think that's one of those things where I'll say it and everyone will go, sorry, what? So for example, here, I want to find exactly where that W starts. So this is pen, so I'm not doing that. I'm going on to look where that first stitch starts and then measure along. I'm doing it in inches just because I always do. And this is where it finishes. So it's 4 1/8 long. So I know that the center point is going to be about here. This is my tester, so that's my 2 inches, and then I'm in a 16th between there. It might have been easier to do centimeters and millimeters, but anyway, I know that that's going to be my center point, which means that when I'm starting off on my actual fabric, this needs to be 2.2 1/16. Like I said, I should have done that in millimeters, but anyway, so that line, and then I can do the same with the second line as well. I can measure that up, find the central point, and then when I'm actually drawing my lines on here, if this is what it was going on, I can draw those lines out. I would measure these in between, but I'm just doing this for speed to show you because I want to get to the machine. So say I was doing 3 lines. This is my center. So that first one, that first line, I measured that I needed to start at 2 1/16. So I know that W is going to start there. And that should mean that I can get it sort of tabbed as I go down on the poem. It does take a lot more time to do this. But as I say, if it is specifically a poem or you want to do something like that, then that's what you're doing. It's preparation, as I say, always preparation with this. If you want to get a good finish, take the time to do it. So on this atelier, I'm going to go into my lettering here and then choose. I've got a couple of alphabets in here, and I'm going to go with block because I get upper and lower case in this, and as I said, I do like to have that. So I'm going to do a capital letter at the start. So if I were to do LOVE and then gap, and then 2 and then gap, and then I'm going to go back into my capitals, love to sew, there we go, and then gap. And then I can also add in, because if I go back here, I've got symbols down the bottom, So I've got little hearts and things, so I could add in a little heart at the end. Okay, so that is my next one that I can then stitch out. As I say, on this, the Atelier 7, the Atelier 9 and the 9450, 9480, machines like that, when you have this screen, you'll actually see it all written out for you as you go. Also the 5270, you can see the lettering on the screen as well. So we're now ready to sew. I'm going to do it on this bottom one. So the gap in my foot, I'm going to come in a lot closer to there so I can show you. So the gap in my foot here is sitting against this line here, and the edge of my foot is sitting against this line here, and I'm going to keep this lined up as I sew against here. So once I start sewing, and with this I often don't use the foot pedal, I'll use the stop start. So the lettering isn't sitting right down on this line, but it is straight. I'm keeping this line, this is my guideline, not where I want the lettering necessarily to sit. So it's nice and easy to see as we go along. And you'll notice I'm not going too fast. Keep your speed on medium. Give the machine time to actually stitch out. Don't rush it. There we go. So the first thing to notice, and I think a lot of people say, oh, it doesn't look very realistic, is these little jumps in between. These are not part of the stitch. You can get rid of these, and I always do, because this makes a massive difference. Each of these letters has been locked off with that little stitch, the 3 little stitches, the knotting stitches, so it's not going to come unravelled. These are just where, a bit like on a bigger embroidery machine, they're called jump threads, that just take it from one stitch to the next. So I go in with my seam ripper on the top and just go through those. And I think even now you can see, this obviously will iron off this black line underneath, but these are all now up here. Now before I trim them, I normally turn it over and then just, I don't actually cut into these, I just normally give it a little wriggle and a tug, and it often is enough to just bring those top loose threads through back onto the underneath, and any that aren't I can then go onto the front and trim. But you can see the difference it makes taking the time to do that. So I can now just, these scissors, look, they've got a slight little bend to them. These are brilliant for this sort of job. You can just get rid of all those little fluffy bits. And doing things like this, just taking the time to do that, does make a massive difference in how that actually finished, the finished stitching lettering is going to look. Something like this, for example, I can neaten off those sides. This is stitch and tear, so I would be able to just tear this away, or you could use something that disappears when you wash it. Sorry, just knocking the camera there. So once that's off, I think it's all off, it's no longer stiff and uncomfortable or anything like that, but it does mean that I can actually turn it into one of those labels that then could sit in the back of my garment. So you can see that you could do washing instructions, you could do name labels for school as well. You could now, if you wanted to, put on, if I was giving this to certain people, I might not, and I know they're not going to actually sew this on, then I could actually iron on Bondaweb on the underneath, so they could then just iron it into a garment or something. Depends who you're giving it to, doesn't it? The chances are it'll come back to you. Can you sew these in, please? So as I say, I could just neaten off those sides or just use pinking shears, but I have then got a nice label, I can double it under and it can just sit in a seam somewhere. So as I said before, with things like this, I would probably do quite a few and then just have a little collection of them. It's also really nice to do on ribbons as well, like I showed you on the bag, for example. And again, I would use that stitch and tear. Here's a piece which irons on, or even just hold a couple of layers of the sewing and then trim that away afterwards. But you do need to stabilize. Okay, I keep stressing that with a lot of the stuff that we're doing, but as I keep saying, preparation is everything. And if you don't prepare your fabrics, etc., you know, with the best will in the world, the best machine in the world, it's still not going to be able to get the finish that you want if you haven't actually prepared it properly. So I've got my label here done and I'm thinking, oh, I can save that, so I want to pop it into a folder. So I've got a little folder up here, and depending on the machine that you've got, if you've got the capability to do this on your machine, it might be in a slightly different place on your screen, but this is the sort of thing you're looking for, a little folder, and the arrow is going in, so I want to open that up. I then have different files. I can make new files. So for example, on this one, I'm going to make a file and I'm going to call it labels. So there we go. Okay. So here's my file here. So I can now, with this specific one that I've just made, I've got the opportunity to edit it because it will give it an automatic name. So I'm going to call this one Mum because it's the Mum made one. Okay, and then I need to choose where I'm going to put it, so I'm putting it in labels and then okay. So if I come out of that screen, just back to my ordinary screen, I'm now going down here because this is my saved folders here, so the arrow is actually coming up on here. So I'm going to press that, and here I've got my folders, go into labels, and there it is, Mum. So when I press on there, there it is, ready to go. Okay, so I just wanted to go through that if you've never used that before. As I say, all the shenanigans on that will be in saving a pattern combination, saving a monogram in your instruction book. So maybe walk through it in your instruction book, because I'm on the Atelier 9 here, but on different models they might be in slightly different places. Okay, I know on the 6700 QCP, for example, there is a little file, but it's actually like a button. So anyway, different models, but if you've got that capability, it's well worth using. So just for a quick little project, if you wanted to have a go at something, I picked up at a show recently these, they're so cute, these tiny little bee buttons, and I thought it might be nice to just make a couple of little quick gifts for swaps and things like that. So I've drawn roughly around the hoop that it's going to go into, just to give me an idea of the outline. I've also cut out, Bondwebbed and cut out all my petals, which are going to be for my flower. But what I wanted to show you mainly was the lettering, because I want to write "Be kind," and I want it to look as if the bee is flying across here. So I've given myself a line to sew on, and if we go into my folder labels, here we go, bee. I've already prepped this as I showed you before, so if we go along looking, you can see I've got it all done here with the dashes, which, just to show you, they're on, can you see, look, you've got all of this, your question marks, exclamation marks, things like that as well. So I've used the dash on here. so that it's going to look like the bee is flying along. So I've got all that set. I'm going to take it back to the beginning, and that's ready to run. So if I now come back to the machine and I start stitching, now I'm going to keep my speed good and low here so that I'm also going to change my foot out, because for something like this, my open toe, the custom craft foot, always gives me a much better view. So I can actually line it up on this line that I'm following. And then, as I say, my speed is nice and low. So I can start sewing, because what I want to do is stop every now and then. So there, for example, as I start to lose the line, so that I can then again stop, lift and turn. And now we're coming into that lettering, and the lettering is on the center. So again, I want to turn it, so that line, I'm trying to keep that line in the center, and then as I lose that line, I'm moving, and then I'm going back onto my dashes. The dashes are nice and simple, and then as we come up, there's the K, but I've completely lost this line now, so I know that before I start the I need to turn. And then I'm kind of back in the middle, and I'm still in the middle for the D as well. But as I finish off that D, I'm starting to lose that line, and then I'm going to be back onto those dashes. And that one's fine, back and forward. So stop, lift and turn. If you've got the pivot, put your pivot on. I haven't used the pivot on this actually, but so I'm getting quite a curve on here now, and that's it. So in between each of these, as with my lettering, and because it is part of the lettering, those dashes, I can actually get rid of those little jumps in between, because they're always the thing, aren't they, that make the difference. So once I've gone in between all of these, just going to bring you out a minute, because I'm going to flip it over and do that same thing where I just wriggle, not necessarily cutting, wriggle that up, because what will happen then is it will bring, especially the very short threads, it always brings the very short threads through, I find, which gives me less to trim on the other side. So I think that's everything. So there we go, look, so you can see there's just a couple of little little bits there to trim away. So I can go in again with my little curved scissors and trim those ends away. But I end up with something a lot more interesting. And I think that's the thing with the lettering, is that, you know, make it interesting. if you were putting this on a little girl's dress, for example, or, you know, around the bottom of a little pair of shorts, because there's some lovely beef fabrics out there, aren't they? So, you know, or onto a little bag or anything like that. This is the kind of thing that you can do just to make that lettering a bit more interesting and give it a bit more of a creative look. So I'm going to go in and iron on now all of my petals, and once they're ironed on, I'm going to use my triple stitch. I've got a really lovely variegated thread in orange that I'm going to use for that, and that's going to go around so I can do the detail of these, my sort of sunflower. And then I'm going to have a little bit of black in the middle so that I can do something a bit interesting around there. There we go. So once again, a really quick run through of what is quite a wide subject, but I hope it encourages you to use the lettering maybe a little bit more creatively on your machines, and also answers a few of any questions you may have had about getting that lettering looking good. If you've got any further questions, do please pop them in the comments below and I will get back to you. And if you'd like to give a little thumbs up to tell me if this is the sort of thing you like, that would be absolutely brilliant. If you press the bell for notifications, you will be reminded when there's a new video dropping in from us here at Janome UK. So see you next time for more fun and games.